Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Groupthink. Groupthink is our dialogue series at CU where we pick a topic and have a conversation about whatever feels meaningful. My name is Madison, and I'm a high school senior from Verdigris, Oklahoma, and I am joined by so many amazing members of our community. So if everyone will just take a second to introduce themselves, that'd be great.
Hey everyone, I'm Maryam. I'm also a high school senior and I'm from the suburbs of Chicago.
Hey everyone, I'm also a high school senior and I'm from Vancouver, Washington.
Hi, I'm Noor. I'm also a high school senior and I'm also...
Oh, I think it cut out, but all good.
Yeah.
And hi, I'm Chabu. I am a first year and I currently reside right outside of Toronto.
Hey, I'm Max. I am a sophomore in Portland, Maine.
I am Jonah. I'm a high school senior living in St. Louis, Missouri.
Hi, I'm Phoebe. I'm a high school senior living in Dallas, Texas.
Hey, I'm Gary. I'm one of the co-founders of Civics Unplugged. I'm currently in New York City.
Awesome. And today we're talking about the Civics Unplugged community. So we like to start off with a word association. So think of your 3 words, write them down, don't write them down, whatever you want. And then we can go through and talk about those. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, anyone want to go first?
I can start off.
Okay.
So my 3 words are powerful, engaging, and evolving.
And feel free to elaborate on why you chose those words. I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to, but...
I think powerful just because there's just so much potential and capacity to do good here. Engaging because I don't think I've ever been in a space where I just love to spend more time here. And then evolving because we are in a constant state of evolution. And I think that that's the most unique and beautiful thing about CU.
Engaging is definitely true. Chabu and I spent within the last, from yesterday and the day before, we had spent 7 hours, I think, on calls together. So that was pretty crazy.
My 3 words were passion, collaboration, and community. Passion because I feel like everyone's so passionate about everything they do. Collaboration because the way that everyone works together and collaborates on ideas is really inspiring. And then community because, again, as you said, you and Chabu literally spent 7 hours on a call together, but I've met so many incredible people through CU, and it's fostered such an incredible sense of community. So yeah.
My 3 words are revolutionary because CU, joining CU definitely changed the way that I approach a lot of things in my own life. And along those lines, also enlightening because every time I get on a jam session, I learn something new about the way the world works or the way that my place is in the world, which is always really cool to me. And then just supportive because I always know that I have people at CU that are in my corner, and that's something that's I think a hallmark of a great community.
My 3 words are love, energy, and wisdom, because I feel like it's a community that incorporates all 3 of those things to be supportive and revolutionary.
I can go next. My 3 words are driving, cooperative, and idealistic. And that just comes from the idea we talk about people being driven a lot, but not so much about the forces that drive them. And so just that kind of relentless pursuit of a goal, which in our case is a better democracy, but that relies on having people around you.
I can go next. My 3 words are dialogue, respect, and relationships. The first being because I think the conversations we have here are unlike any other that at least I've experienced. Additionally, the level of respect that I've witnessed for other people's identities, their opinions has been pretty incredible. And the relationships between people are also really solid, especially for something that is entirely online.
I wrote down joyful belonging, inspiration, and growth. Yeah, I think those words are pretty self-explanatory, but yeah.
I would say for me, life altering, because CU literally changed my life. People, I feel like everything at the core about what we do is about people, whether it be empowering each other or people outside the community and the future. Because I really think the people in this community will build a better future for us. So yeah, and I know there's a lot of people here, so I hope that I did not skip over anyone. Did I? Or we all good? Okay, cool. So would anyone like to start us off with, it doesn't have to be a question, it can be a statement, literally anything. Anyone want to start off?
The first thing that came to mind for me was that, and this is, this has been something that's been brought up numerous times, but there doesn't seem to be too much of a conservative or Republican voice in CU. I feel like if we are, to truly call ourselves an organization for democracy, we need to show that we are capable of having those conversations with people that we disagree with. So that's what came to mind.
I'm curious. I think this is both a generational and just an age thing. But Gen Zers are, in general, don't have a whole lot of representation from the right. And so I'm curious how accurately we represent the spectrum of Gen Z opinions. And that's not a thing I have any data on. That's why it's a question. But I'm curious.
I think it probably depends on where you look. I definitely know a lot more Gen Zers who are progressive thinkers than who are conservative thinkers. But I have a strong feeling that, if I were to go further north in my state towards the more rural areas, that like you can even see it on people's lawns because of the political leaders that are named there.
I think that this question ties to a really interesting conversation that I had with Gary and Madison yesterday about like metrics or the things that or like the data points we refer to check on how we're developing and like a thing that we want to do well, right? And so I think that like overall CU has the ambition to like be reflective of the country as a whole, irrespective of location and political alignment. And so like measuring conservative, like I guess like participation from like conservative Gen Zers as well is like one of those metrics in trying to achieve that ambition. So I think that like my take on this though is the fact that I agree with Max in the sense that like I wouldn't say that there's like a distinctive conservative voice in CU, But I do think that we've been effective in having like a variety of perspectives here. And so sometimes that variety isn't necessarily relayed in like political alignment because we're also super young. So it's not a conversation we have all the time of like, are you red or are you blue? Which I think is super healthy. But yeah, I think that this is a reflection of a metric, but like the underlying goal is to make sure that we have a variety of perspectives here.
I think you bring up a really good. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I think you bring up a really good point because so my parents are really conservative and they make jokes about when I spend time with CU, it's like, oh, they're turning you into a liberal. But I have to explain to them, like, I don't think I've ever had like an actual traditional political conversation with any of you. And I spend like all my time at CU. And so, I mean, varying perspectives doesn't just have to be like on the political spectrum. And I feel like that's not really understood. And that's something that I've come to learn through the community.
Ashley, feel free to jump in, but a question I want to ask all of you is, what do we focus on a lot that other typical civic, political, leadership, whatever orgs don't, that you find valuable?
One thing that I had mentioned yesterday, Gary, you were in this call, is that answers aren't very interesting, or at least they're not as interesting as the questions that prompt them. And so I think that's something that we do, in my opinion, really, really well, because we give people these really open-ended, like this conversation, for example, really open-ended, question-based situations. And if all we get out of that is more questions, it's still a win.
Yeah, I'm glad that Max started this conversation with this idea of representation, and then we quickly got into the topic of how are we being boxed in by people's assumptions about what we need to talk about and who we need to be and how we must be diverse. Who is dictating this, and who wins when we? I know that's it's a long ass question, but like, who wins by dictating the terms upon which upon which people decide it's right to commune with each other? I think Democrats and Republicans really win when we just talk about red-blue representation. I think both parties really win.
I think to answer the question on like what do we focus on that other civic organizations don't, to respond to that, I would say that it's a really healthy way of like not disengaging with like political traditions for the sake of disengaging, but like questioning the political traditions that we have and then determining if they have real relevancy for like an effective approach to things like democracy reform. I think even from like its conception, the idea of just like addressing democracy reform from a systems perspective rather than being like, look at what we have and like, let's see what we can do in response to that. I think that was really powerful. But then even culturally, we've seen more of that in the sense that like the way that we engage in dialogue and conversation and like the things that we value, like talking about, you know, our distinct perspectives or reevaluating, you know, components of our society as a whole. I think that it's really important in the sense that like we've just become really good about questioning political traditions, strengthening them as needed, and just like being critical about practices that we have in these spaces.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I would add to that I think we also do a good job of not just kind of examining like external systems and like things that need to shift, but like examining the systems of ourselves and better, you know, understanding how like we operate as individuals and how we are able to like plug into the world and contribute to shifting or building new systems. So that's something that came to mind. I think like on another note of what is something cool we do, that other civic orgs do not. I think like to me it has always been like about inviting people to co-create what CU looks like. I think it's really hard to find organizations that will trust young people to actually like create and own parts of the community. And I just think there's a lot of trust that has been placed in community members in CU that I don't find outside of here.
I'll like add on to like both of your points, Ashley, because it's rare that like someone's motto is actually in line with like the actions that they take. So like I'll say for people that don't know, CU's motto is the kids will lead. And like I think it's like when I first saw it, I was like, oh yeah, great. Like the kids will lead. Everyone says that. Gen Z's the future. Great. Another org like that. But I think it's cool that like, well, as you see here, like we're actually leading, like we're the people like leading these conversations and like innovating ideas. And like we have the CU community you know, to support us and like help us along whatever we're doing. But ultimately, like they do trust us, which I think is really cool and unique. And just one other thing, when you were talking about like examining the systems of ourselves, I think that is something really cool. Just going back to like having diverse perspectives. A lot of people might like parrot other perspectives, but CU actually does a really good job of like allowing us to develop our own unique perspectives and like identifying what we value and where that would kind of like put us in terms of like what we believe in and like what we will fight for. So I think that is interesting too, because in terms of like boxing people in, we don't necessarily like say, oh, I'm this or I'm that, but we just allow people to explore what they might fall into and then kind of go from there. So I think that's something really unique about CU as well.
Yeah, so many snaps to that. I like what you said just reminded me of like, you know, like CU like has like almost like our own like school of thought, and like we're kind of like highlighting what like this civic religion might look like. And I just feel like there's so much like context that people have created together that like just makes things so much more coherent within the community and outside of it.
And on that note, like one of the things I find specifically, like to Ashley and Maryam's point, is like this is a space for expression in like whatever form you want it to be. And I think that that's not only is it cool because you won't find it in other civic orgs, but like you don't find that at school or like wherever else you want, like wherever else you're spending your time. And so like the first thing that comes to mind is like emojis. Like everyone, like there's emojis on the application, like they're used in our Slack all the time, and they come with their benefits, and I think that's really cool. But also like there's like there are multiple parts to like try. There are multiple mediums you can take to try and say what you're trying to say, and people will try to understand you and engage in dialogue to like really get to the root of what you're trying to say.
Something else that I think of when I think of what civic, sorry, something else that I think of when I think of like what does CU do that other orgs don't. CU really gave me the opportunity to grow like both internally and like with my political views, but it was also a safe and empathetic space for my ideas to be changed and for me to be corrected on language I used that wasn't like politically correct, or the ways of thinking that I was challenged to see things from a different perspective. I think empathy is definitely like an underlying theme in the CU community, and it's something I definitely really appreciate.
I kind of want to echo something that, you know, has almost indefinitely been brought up before, but the question, what feels meaningful to you, is one that I hear a lot, and that that's something I really appreciate, because we aren't often given the opportunity to discuss our passions. And I really like having the ability to, and the encouragement to voice that to the, you know, to a group of people, is something that CU has given me tonight. That's a really powerful thing.
Madison, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I don't know what happened.
My bad.
Okay.
Well, so Madison, can you self-mute when other people are talking, because there's a lot of echo that your computer generates?
I can't see the screen on my Zoom, so I don't know if there's like.
I think if you hover over the green bar, that might be.
Oh, awesome. Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Cool.
Okay, my bad. But Max, were you asking that as a question, or were you just saying that?
No, I was saying it as a response to Gary's question.
Got it.
Just the act of focusing on people's passions instead of like giving them specific things to focus on is really important.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you all noticed, because everyone's telling you to be someone. I think it's probably good to have at least one space where that's not happening. Beyond like just like being happy and having good well-being, and like increasing the well-being of other people. Like, I think that's probably easy to get behind, right? But to tell you like you have to be a lawyer or go to the school, think a certain way, vote a certain way. Wow, like I don't like the fact that there's not many other orgs that allow you to do that, but I mean, clearly it's resonating, this effort that we're putting in to create that space.
So this is going to be kind of a turn. So we've been talking a lot about what we do really well. So I want to pose, what is something that we can get better at?
One thing that I can think of is that like everyone who is engaged with CU is like supercharged, because they're like, yes, like CU has changed my life. But I'm wondering if there are ways that we can like, well, I don't want to like force anyone, because obviously like people have to choose to want to like be involved. But I know that like some people who just kind of like happen to like fall into staying extra involved in CU have like grown so much from it. So I'm wondering if there's like ways that we can just kind of like open it up and invite more people to get more involved, because I'm sure that there are people who just don't know how to plug in, but would probably benefit a lot from, or even really want to, but just don't know how to approach that question.
Go ahead,
Go for it. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, and like on that note, I think that once people are plugged in, I know that like at the start of CU, I was always very like in the fellowship and like during commence and everything. There's this like running joke that like you have to say something profound, otherwise you don't say anything at all. But in reality, like because everything is so meaningful, like I'm wondering if there's a way that we can remind other people and ourselves, because I know that's something I had to do, that like whatever you say is going to be meaningful, and like there shouldn't be like whatever pressures you're feeling to add something to a conversation, like it really is like a very relaxed, like there's a relaxed energy, because like again, whatever you say is going to be meaningful. And I know I put a lot of like stress on myself, that it was like, if I'm gonna unmute, like whatever comes out of my mouth has to be like gold, like it has to be like on point and like everything. But ideas get bounced around because a bunch of different stuff is being said.
Chabu, could I invite you to speak more on that? You had some amazing reflections recently about grammar, coherence, all that. So, that was so profound.
Yeah, I think that like I definitely was of the mindset of like, I shared the same like mindset with Noor, in the sense that like the idea that like, I know that this is something that would happen often in CU, where like I'm having like an amazing Slack conversation with someone, and then I have to like pause before I send it and like reread it and like fix all the typos and like reevaluate the grammar and all this stuff, and how it just like stops me in my treks when I'm like running towards like a great idea. That's how I like to picture it. And so I kind of, it's not that I was just like, oh, dismiss grammar and like, I can just say like absolute nonsense. But I think that it goes back to something I think Phoebe mentioned, is the fact that like it's a safe space to like not be in a perfect or not being in like a finished product or like perfect state. Like if I send this message to like Noor or Gary right now, like they get the vibe of what I'm saying, or they get like the foundation of the idea. And so that gives me room to keep developing the idea rather than focusing on like how it's executed or the tools that I use to like put that out there. So I think that it's like one of those things though, like it's very much a parallel of like your internal growth and how you approach things, and then also just like the space that you exist in that helps you do that. So there's like a duality to that, is my comment on it.
Something that Noor and Chabu said really reminded me of something. I know like so while everyone's like applying to the fellowship and everything for the 21 fellows, I had some friends reach out to me asking like, what is CU, all that, they wanted to get involved. But one of my friends who actually went to the CU summer camp as well was like, oh, I don't know if I can do it or I'll be good enough, because everyone seems like so put together. Something that CU does, this goes back to the last question as well, but it works on your whole person. It's not just your passions and what you want to do, like when you grow older, or like what project you want to start, or empowering you to start this organization or this, but it works on building you up, like at the core of who you are, so that you can better understand what you want to do and what you want to invest your time in. Something that I feel could be spoken about more is definitely the leadership blueprint and like the different quests and stuff whenever it comes to recruiting new members. Because after talking to her, I was like, CU doesn't want a perfect person, because no one's perfect, but also what else can like we help you with if there's nothing to fix. CU works on building you up as an entire person in order for you to make change, because regardless if you start something or you're just you still contribute to society, and that is still in itself monumental and so valid. So yeah.
Completely agreed. I want to kind of I think something you said really resonated, which was that like you don't have to start something, and I think well, I mean, like you don't have to start something to contribute, and I feel like in a lot of other like civic youth leadership programs, like it's like the entire program is about you like creating some sort of like project or starting some sort of organization at the end of like this fellowship experience. And like part of that is because like the org running the fellowship needs to like prove in some way that like you did this, but I think that just contributes to people always feeling like they like need to start something. And like I don't necessarily think that's the best way to go about change. So I don't know, that just really resonated with me.
Something that, go ahead, Phoebe.
Oh no, I just wanted to add on to what Ashley said about how there's so much pressure to always start something, but there can be 100 million organizations in the world, but if they're all working on the same project or on the same problem, like in different ways, but it's still the same, sometimes it can do more harm than good. But I just wanted to throw that out there. So,
What I was just gonna say is that when Maryam said, like, are there ways that we can get more people involved and plugged into CU? Something that I've been wondering about is like, what happened to the other, 150 fellows who started with us? I don't know that it's, and that assumes that we should be keeping people involved after they complete the fellowship. However, if there is a desire of anybody to like stay in the CU community, then I feel like we have a responsibility to, take care of that.
I think like on a different point, but still within this question, what's something that we can get better at? I think that this is one of the very few spaces where like people talk about like where people have the conversation of like having love for our country and our democracy, but also like very much being aware of and respecting like the flaws and damage that's like within that said democracy. And I think that like for me, I had a really weird spot where like because I have love for America, I also want to hold it accountable to do better. And but I think that like as an organization, we've like started that really important conversation, but I think that there's room to continue to like get a better grasp of like genuinely like the implications of our flawed democracy, not just like domestically but also internationally, because that's also like a really big thing that doesn't go in that doesn't get discussed enough, that we could also like really learn from as a generation.
I think what's super interesting about what Chabu just said is like before CU, there's kind of this, at least I have the notion that like criticizing your country or holding it accountable was unpatriotic in some way. And so you have to really like I had to unplug from that line of thinking so that I could actually be able to criticize it while recognizing that like that doesn't make me any less of like an American or like someone who wants to be proud of their country. So I guess my new question would be like, what are some of the things that we've all unplugged from because of CU or because of something that we've recognized while in this community?
Madison struggle. It's okay. It's okay. You can finish it later.
Yeah, one thing that I hadn't really thought of before, so I apologize if this thought isn't totally finished, but that this conversation has brought to mind is that there's a lot of sort of false dichotomies and things that we assume are just binary choices, either this or that I think within CU we just kind of take for granted aren't have a lot more nuance, but I don't think we do enough to talk about that explicitly and then give members of the community the tools to talk about that with people outside the community. Because it's very easy to just get siloed with people who think like you do. So you don't want to do that.
What's an example of something that you previously thought was binary, but now you recognize more 3D, I guess?
Sorry, yes.
Or anyone.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that this is like the same thing as like something that I've unplugged from is the idea that like progress, not linear, not binary, in a lot of different ways, in the sense that like I thought like progress in our systems would be exclusively reflected by like progress in our systems, but in reality also like self-development and progress within myself is also a variation of like progress for our systems. And then even the way that we address like the idea of like making headway or milestones, it's not necessarily just like moving towards your goal, but then also just like learning, you know, this pre-established goal that we had may actually not be something that like we no longer like see as the end goal or as like what would be good. The fact that things can be in constant evolution, like changing your mind, evolution, that is another variation of progress. And so that's definitely something that I've unplugged from, and also appreciate that I've unplugged from, because it's transformed how I look at a lot of different things.
I was not aware of this perception, but I think I previously perceived change as starting on a large level, like a state level or nation level.
Yeah.
And what CU did was it kind of forced me to look at myself. And again, I wasn't really even aware of this, but I think now that I know who I am, And once everybody does know who they are, they will be so much more capable of contributing and living a good life.
I think something I've unplugged from is like, I don't know, like the idea of myself as an independent person. I guess like growing up, like I was really proud of being independent, like, and I was proud of being able to do things on my own. I think that was something that like my parents emphasized a lot, like, you know, you gotta like, you know, have the initiative to be able to um like do things by yourself. But I think I realized that like there's a lot of power in doing things with other people and in like taking collective action. Yeah, so I guess like that idea of like successes as an individual is something I've unplugged from. Yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say. So there was something else, but yeah, I don't know.
That's really interesting to me because it prompts a question that, for better or worse, we haven't really had to think about yet, which is, as fellows and builders, you know, move around in the world and have achievements, right? How, to what extent is it important for us to say, to lay claim to those achievements, right? Like a lot of organizations, like a school is going to say, like, look at what our alums did, or like, look at what our faculty members did. Or like a corporation might say, oh, look at one of our employees did, or something like that. How important is that to us? Because it's good to recognize people's achievements, first of all, and by associating good things with our name, it helps us. It's not just selfish, right? Because it helps us do this very selfless thing that we're trying to do. But also, like, how much energy do we want to spend on that?
I mean, like your question just reminds me of like, well, how important is it for our donors to know that like things are happening? But like, I guess like I would almost turn that question around and be like, how do we help fellows and builders be proud of saying, yeah, like CU has shaped my journey? Because like, you know, like I would totally credit CU for things without necessarily like being asked. It's just because it has been such a big part of my journey. Like it would leave like this empty gap if I didn't talk about it. So like I don't like, I think there's that balance of like, yes, like we can claim credit for things that fellows have done, but it's also like, well, how do you yeah, like how do you make it cool for fellows and builders to actually just take initiative to do that themselves?
I think oh, go ahead, Max.
Thank you. Just something that kind of was similar to what Ashley said was that I think the practice of, you know, on Sundays we'll do shout outs. The practice of being grateful could help people, like if they don't already, it could help them learn the power of saying thank you and for showing what other people have done for you. And the way I envision it, and you know, this is me having very little experience on, you know, the leadership level of CU, but the way I envision it being is leaving it up to the individual. Like if the individual really felt like CU has helped them along the way, then they would give them a shout out and give them that credit.
So here's one thing I'll add, Jonah. I'm sorry, Chabu. Just for a little bit. One thing I'll add, Jonah, is that I think the entire society incentivizes you to brag about yourself and say, I worked this many community service hours. I did this. So I don't know if we need another force that is reminding people to brag about themselves. You literally can't get into college unless you say, I did everything myself, basically. So just to have a balancing force, right? And it's not saying like, you know, we're actually trying to do the opposite of reducing your sense of agency. We're trying to give you a sense of agency, create conditions upon which your agency can flourish. But to not recognize how much your development is tied to, can be attributed to, or is entangled with the development and achievements of other people, is to be intellectually dishonest, and also to put you into a mindset that is actually self-destructive and destructive of the world, quite frankly. So if we can play an even small part in allowing people to see the kind of beautiful, maybe dialogue between the individual and the collective, I think we will have really added to the people's collective mental models about how change gets made, how individuals get developed, how societies get developed.
I think that I resonate with what Ashley said in the sense that like there's no forced function to like say, oh, like here's like me, but then like also see you. You know what I mean? Like I don't feel forced to have to mention see you, but like I have also never found myself in a situation where like the opportunity to talk about CU is there and I don't do it, just because it's just so intertwined with like so many newfound values and things that I prioritize that it's easy to have that conversation, because there's just a genuine sense of like appreciation, and like respect for the things that I've learned from the space. And then I also think there's validity in bringing it up, not just because it's like tied to my own personal development, but also in like there's so much that we do here that intentionally goes against the grain of like normal operating systems of organizations and, you know, people who engage in this kind of work, that I think by bringing it back to CU, you can almost say like this is evidence that disengaging with those practices has added value and produces good work.
I'll also just add on to what Chabu was saying, that especially as we grow CU and approach people outside of CU's like original sphere of influence, we have to like understand that people are still operating in like traditional models of success. So they're like, oh, well, if CU didn't do anything notable, then like I'm not going to spend my time there. And like for all of us, I think we kind of like have a changed sense of like what growth is and what progress is just by virtue of like going through CU and like being a part of this community. But for a lot of people that we're approaching, maybe unless they don't see those numbers or the people that we've gotten to work with us, they might not be convinced. And so I think that is kind of like one of the reasons why we do have to keep not claiming them in a way, but maybe just like showing off the fact that like CU has helped all these people. And in no way should we say like, oh, you know, CU is completely responsible for all of this, and without CU you would have never gotten anywhere. Like, no, not at all, but definitely still saying that like CU played a huge role in helping people get to this point might also encourage other people to say, hey, if CU helped them do that, then they might be able to help me with this also. And so it might be something that will allow people to be inspired to plug in. So I think that there's definitely still a lot of value in showing off like the work that all of our builders have done.
One of the things Maryam talked about that kind of reminds me of like the previous question a little bit too is like, I think that like the way we define success is like the end product or like the end goal or the really cool thing that happened, versus like what you learned along the way to like actually get to that point. And so like the only real like the first thing that comes to mind is like college apps. Like you're told that like you've done well if you've gotten into the school you wanted to, or if like you got like a certain acceptance letter. And like while the process, like the actual like application process can be really draining, like there is stuff that you learn about yourself along the way. And so like I think prioritizing what you learn and like what got you to that point of being able to claim something, is more important than actually like showing other people that you've claimed it.
I love what Noor said in the sense that like it's more about being an embodiment of the values that we share here rather than like falling into the trap of just like saying, oh, like here's the thing that exists that like really matters and you should care about it too.
Yeah, and to that end, I think like I don't know, I think like the greatest mark of like you achieving something is if you kind of documented like your learning journey along the way so other people are able to achieve it as well. So I don't know, like people being able to like look at what you did and like realize like, wow, I can do that too. Like that's literally like the best way of like claiming what you were able to accomplish.
What I actually just mentioned about like writing and documentation kind of struck me because I've never seen so much sharing of people's thoughts in writing, and I feel like it's probably the most solid way to cement into other people's minds like what CU is all about. Like I feel like we can use that to our advantage.
Both what Ashley and Max said kind of brought up another question. Just throughout this call, we've kind of been talking about collaboration and like documentation and learning and how it's a journey. So it kind of brought up another question that I had, and that's given that mutual learning is such a big part of CU, what is something you have learned from a builder on this call? And I also think it ties really nicely into the fact that we were talking a lot about supporting each other and just being a community that appreciates everyone. So yeah, I will start since I posed a question. But one of the things that I learned from Chabu is that, how do I phrase this? Okay, so Chabu always says things that in my mind are like really, really deep and profound. Like I have never met someone, I guess, that like always is just like spitting knowledge, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's like one of the things that I've learned from her is that it's not like it's a spectrum, right? Like you can be like have all this wisdom, but like also be like super down to like share it and chill, which I feel like a lot of people before this that I've interacted with kind of like there's like a phrase for it, but like keep that to themselves because they're like, oh, now that I have this wisdom, like I can use it to get further. But like Chabu, you've always been like super open and like honest and like sharing everything just to help all of us out. And that's something that I really appreciated from you, and it's helped me grow a lot and unplug from some negative mindsets that I've had.
I'm gonna hop on the Chabu train because Chabu is so incredibly insightful, and I feel like she could just easily be someone who's kind of like a know-it-all and like really stuck up and people wouldn't question it because like she's just like brilliant, but she goes like in the exact opposite direction, and she's very humble and caring and loving to everyone around her, and so that's definitely something that I really admire as well.
I'm gonna add to this train because something that I've told her is that, and it ties a lot with what Madison and Maryam said. Chabu, like, she doesn't like with others, you have to learn the lessons and you have to unpack them after you finish speaking to them or learn them from like the stories they told you about their lives. But with Chabu, she just says the lessons and then keeps going with her day. Like she didn't just drop a whole goodie bag of treats at your door, but it's not something that you have to go back and unpack, but rather she works it through with you and helps you apply it to your own life as well.
I'm like gonna second everything everyone has already said. I think Chabu is very like a very transparent person, and I think that's rare to come across. But I also want to add Myran and Madison to the mix because I think that like at least my experience of like group work at school teaches you that it's like treacherous and like one person is gonna pick up all the slack for everyone else. But like being able to work with like such powerful women who really do want to like make something out of something and like really do want to contribute something, it's always like there's a level of like love and accountability, but also like we're going to get this done and it's going to happen the way like it needs to so that it's successful and so that it works. And so like they're constant inspirations of like people or like the person I'm trying to become. So I always appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'll second that as well. I mean, not just for Noor and Maryam, but for really all of you guys. It's like I've drawn this comparison before, but you guys helped me realize like the distinction between friends and the people that you have fun with. I feel like you guys really embody what friendships should look like. And so that has just been like a really beautiful thing for me to realize, like mutual support, mutual learning, mutual growth, all of these just like beautiful things that happen within our community that really define like human flourishing and support. And so that's just been something really amazing as well.
I definitely want to add to this in the sense that like I have learned so much from everyone in this community, and thank you for all the kind words. I have so much love for everyone on this call, but like one of the big takeaways I think that I've learned is from Gary. I've always been someone who like associates with the big picture, like something small will happen, and like my first instinctive thought is like this connects to like colonialism, or like this connects to capitalism. And I always thought that I had like a grasp of the big picture, and Gary's really just like widened the scope of like things to reference to and parallels to consider, and like schools of thought and thinking that like apply to the work that we do here and the work that we do in general as we operate as like human beings. So I appreciate just like him redefining the fact that there is no boundary. I think that's really cool and imperative to like the work we do here.
Appreciate that, Chabu. One thing that I think, again, another thing that like pretty much everyone here has shown, Nora I think especially has shown, that when something is going well that you've worked on, when you're winning, you get to feel good about that, and it's okay to be happy. And like you can be working really, really hard all the time, but then when it's going right, it feels good, and that's okay. Like it's all right to be happy about that, and you don't have to make yourself miserable just because you're working really hard.
I'm gonna second that as well. Something that Gary definitely has taught me is, I think we all poked fun at him during the fellowship for being kind of like a workaholic, and I've always associated workaholic with like, oh, you're so unhappy and all this, but now like I technically like I'm working like basically the whole time that I'm awake, and I'm the happiest that I've ever been. So that's really just kind of like revolutionized my view of what work even means and just like the whole connotation around that as well.
You could go ahead.
There you go.
Okay. I think the amount of times my perspectives have been challenged and broadened by people at CU has been amazing. Just between the conversations that have been had, media that has been shared, writing that people have shared, something that I haven't gotten anywhere else, and especially the quality of the perspectives. It's always very deep and logical and human, and I appreciate it.
Something I learned from someone who's actually not on this call, but is a member of the CU community, is Zoe. I learned from her, number one, how to be a more empathetic individual, but also how to challenge people's perspectives in a totally respectful way. I went through the DICE program, and it was such a transformative experience. I learned so much. And I know there was one topic that I didn't completely grasp, or I had a viewpoint that I didn't really like, but I also wanted it to be challenged because I didn't know. I hadn't had my view broadened on how to think about a certain topic in a different way. And she really helped me open my mind to see things from a different perspective, and in that, become more empathetic towards the topic that we were talking about. So yeah, definitely Zoe.
I second that, and I also want to say on the topic of empathy, Max, especially during like our Cool Cats jam sessions, I don't know. I think that like all of us just felt like radically empathetic. I don't even know if that's like a word or like a phrase that people use, but I don't know. Everyone just always felt the love, and you always just really were always empathetic no matter like what was going on. So we all really appreciated that, and I think you've taught us all how to be more like open and aware of like what's going on with other people too. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely second that. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Chabu.
go ahead. No, I just wanted to say that Jonah's starting word of the day was just like the start of like this massive avalanche. Like, I think it provoked something from like all of us in a sense, like we didn't realize how much like we value words, and just engaging in the process of like being really aware and intentional of that has been so mind-blowing. And so thank you for starting that, because it brought a lot of like really core values to the surface that we weren't aware of yet.
On the same topic of like words and being intentional with them, I think like one of the very first time I talked to Ashley, she talked about how like when we're having conversations, we're so like preoccupied with what we're going to respond with that we don't like immerse ourselves in what the other person has already said. And it seems like an obvious thing that you should know, but her pointing it out and like being Ashley, the person to point, like just like the essence that she gave to like the statement itself, it was very perfect, and it's something I still think about, and like something like stuff keeps popping up on my Instagram feed about it, and I'm like, that's it, like it's just completely like changed my mindset, and I think it's cool to be reminded of too.
Another shout out I want to give is to Phoebe. I remember when I first met her, she was like, yeah, I like to give people like 15 minutes to just brag about themselves. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, just to let people talk about themselves. And I don't know, I just really like that.
Oh, Madison, you're literally the sweetest. Thank you.
I actually want to give a shout out to Noor. I still remember the fellowships. I was always so excited for your reflections and your responses to the daily reflection question. And I think you've taught me so much about, like I think the small things that sometimes I just gloss over or miss, and just how important it is to slow down and to notice things, and to really like live in the moment and really just find the beauty in everything around you. So yeah, thank you for teaching me that.
On that note, I also want to give an appreciation to Noor. I like asking really deep questions and having those kind of conversations. And she does as well. And I remember once you asked me what kind of vegetable I would be, and that meant a lot to me. And I just wanted to really appreciate you for like having fun, but also like being able to have that balance. I really respect that so much. Yeah.
Phoebe, I think you should share what vegetable you would decide to be. I think that that's an important addition to the conversation.
Yes, definitely 100%. So I love tomatoes. So I would be a tomato. I'm also a Gemini. So like the contrast between, oh gosh, we can talk about zodiac signs later. But tomatoes are so diverse. They can play a part in anything. You can use them as a sandwich, you can use them as salad. There's different types of tomatoes as well. Like there's the small tomatoes and then there's the big tomatoes. You can eat the tomatoes as an apple. Like that might sound weird, but until you do it, no.
We need to like clip this up and give us a Dario to post on Instagram. This tomato rant.
No, never. I will sue. I'm kidding. No, but no, for real. Tomatoes are so diverse, and because you can use them in any type of way, they might be looked over as like a smaller vegetable. But you know what? They really are just here for everyone, and that's what I want to be, here for everyone, and to be able to be used in different ways. So that is why I'm a tomato. I want to know what vegetables y'all would be. That might be a little sidetracked, but get back to me on that.
Wow, that was incredible.
Wow, that was like the perfect way to end. First of all, with like the shout outs, like what's more CU than just like ending a conversation with shouting each other out, and also the tomato rant, phenomenal. That went by super fast, but do you guys have any reflections on how that conversation was for you?
I'd like to start off by saying it was magic as always, and it's so cool to have like a big conversation with so many people. And I think that the way that we had conversations about like party representation and tomatoes and self-development and like that all just happened and it made so much sense and it was like cohesive and great. It's just like the embodiment of what's so great about this community. So I loved it. I think the conversation was reflective of like CU and all its greatness.
And I think a huge part of that is like, at least for me, all of it felt very natural. Like it, like being able to talk about like who Phoebe is as a tomato and also like a leadership blueprint. Like I think that that's like they're two very like different ends of the spectrum, but like sliding back and forth between that was like something that happened organically. And I think like we still all learned something from it, which is always something I appreciate about like it feels like every dialogue we have in this community.
All right, anything else before we close?
Yeah, I'll just thank you, Gary, for inviting me to this. And it was really cool hearing the different perspectives everybody had to the same question. There was definitely a lot of variation and a lot of agreement. So just a nice, I guess, like a nice visual, even though it wasn't visual, but yeah.
Yeah, to echo what Max is saying, thank you all for letting me join you tonight. This is great. I love it.
Yeah, I just want to say I always love these calls because I love hearing from everyone, just like different perspectives, and I always learn something, but it never feels like learning because it just feels like I'm talking to a bunch of friends. So thank you. This is lovely as always, and can't wait for our next group think.
Yeah, and Madison, if it's okay if I add one more thing, you know, the reason why, I mean, even if we weren't recording this, you know, I'm sure most, if not all of you would say this was an awesome experience. But the reason why this is recorded and we're uploading this and we're not, you know, just trying to promote it and make it like a hit. Like for people, actually Phoebe watched some of the previous episodes and was like, can I be part of this? But it's to, when I talk about all of you, and people think I'm exaggerating when I say like, you're incredible, right? And you won't even believe like the superheroes that we have in our community. So see for yourself, right? This was, like it had to have been organic. It had to have been all of you connecting dots and kind of embodying the culture. And also like, not just that, I feel like the culture deepened. It got richer through this call as well. So I think that it just, I mean, to Chabu's point, this is what CU is all about. And if anyone's watching this, right, and we're actually going to attach this to the orientation crash course this year. So one of the first things that they're going to see is Max's beautiful face, and you know, calling us to do better, which is actually the best thing I can think of. So thank you all so much for taking the time on this holiday week. Have an awesome Thanksgiving.
Thank you guys.
Thank you all.
Bye everyone.